Let's talk to Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, who's a royal commentator and joins us now. Very good morning to you, Rafe.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you. I have to say, we were just chatting about this with Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, who's with me in the studio, saying, didn't know they still had the train, but of course King Charles has barely used the train, and he used it for 2 return trips. 78 grand was the bill, which I was pointing out earlier is roughly the same as a return trip from London to Swindon these days.
Yes, basically, there's not much difference there between our own daily commutes. Look, we agree on most issues, Julia, but I think you and Tom and I will have different views upon this. I'm an old traditionalist. I actually want us to keep the royal train. I'd love us to keep the royal yachts, but I do understand the royal family is a bit more sensible than I am about these sorts of things, and it is an expense now that can't be justified. Her late Majesty adored the train, and she used it greatly to a huge amount. But the King, of course, is reflecting the realities of the modern day. He's also trying to modernise the monarchy, and the necessity of having this train simply isn't there any longer. But actually, there's an opportunity here for the public actually to now see the royal train, because it's been reported that the royal train will go on public display at some point, and so it will become another great asset for the nation.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's something for people to go and look at. Queen and Prince Philip used it quite a lot for overnight visits around the country, so they could just sort of travel overnight and then be there in the morning or rest. It's rather nicely done up. It's sort of like, you know, the Orient Express, isn't it?
That's, well, a bit of a shabbier version of the Orient Express, because when the Queen used it, actually, the interiors hadn't been renovated for decades. But it was first brought in by Queen Victoria in 1840, became the world's first royal train. And yes, King George V preferred sleeping on it compared to staying with aristocrats around the country or whatever. And of course, the entire royal household can then stay and sleep on the train as well. So that also has to be factored into the cost. If they were going to be staying in hotels, those would be added expenses that don't get included.
That's a good point. Exactly. When when the Prime Minister or the head of government or the head of state travel, there's a lot of other people, entourage, the security. So I suppose that there's an element there. Now we understand, this is all part of the announcement on the sovereign grant, the annual accounts which were published late last night, and the sovereign grant funds the monarchy, but it's in return for a load of money that is given up by the Crown estate, isn't it? Explain how that works.
So yes, so in the old days under King George III, the King himself used to fund the running costs of the government with his own money. That became really expensive for George III, and so he agreed to exchange his revenue from the Crown Estate. The Crown Estate are properties, parts of the foreshore of the British Isles, to the government in exchange for something called the civil list. That was done away with a few years ago and replaced by something called the sovereign support grant. So essentially, when a new monarch ascends to the throne, they agree to surrender their revenue from the Crown Estate, which is, billions and billions of pounds, in exchange for a percentage. That was supposed to be 25% of the Crown Estate reserves would go to the monarchy. The King graciously decided to reduce that to only 12%. So 12% of the revenue annually from the Crown Estate goes to the monarch.
So what you're saying is that the Queen was getting far more than she needed. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I'm sorry, they live free in all these palaces, some of which are owned by the nation. If we're going to have a head of state, they need to be, there's to be suitable security and pomp and circumstance. Otherwise, there's no point having them, I think. But we are talking about huge sums of money.
The revenue from the Crown, I mean, the sovereign support grant barely covers the costs, the running costs of the monarchy, and that includes the upkeep of buildings which would need to be upkept by the state anyway. And in fact, it's interesting, the cost of the Italian presidential palace is 4 times the cost of Buckingham Palace. And Buckingham Palace is going through a renovation right now. That would need to be done even if we didn't have a monarchy.
Oh, no, I completely accept that. Absolutely accept that. It's just a question of, the running costs. Now, the thing is, King Charles has pared down working royals. I mean, again, Harry and the Duchess, went off to America. There are many others. He's pared it down very, very, very tightly. There are fewer people to pay for.
The monarchy is extremely effective. It works out to the same. I think it's around 79 pence or whatever per person if you look at the core support grant, which is the same running cost as it does for the Irish presidency. It's about the same per person.
There's a load of other extra costs.
But the issue, of course, is that the monarchy has kept its funding stable for 4 years, despite all the pressures that we've had with inflation and the cost of living going up, salaries going up. The monarchy has been able to make those essential cuts to ensure that it does remain value for money.
Have they made cuts, or was there enough money in this system already? Is King Charles still taking plastic carrier bags full of cash for his charities, or has he stopped doing that?
Well, I'm not privy to His Majesty's...
That police investigation went away very quickly. I mean, again, I know, you all know, I'm a Republican, I'm not a monarchist, but I still think I expect certain standards to be upheld by anyone in that role, whether they're elected or unelected.
Look, I think we have in the monarchy an institution which is the envy of the world, and we are greatly fortunate to have in the presence of His Majesty a king who's so deeply committed to his peoples that he spent the entire duration of his time as Prince of Wales engaged in trying to improve the lives of British people, rather than being a playboy prince who could have been in Monaco playing on the roulette.
He could have been, yeah. I mean, he. I think one can be a monarchist and support the institution without having to, play along with this idea that everything that the royals do is absolutely wonderful and perfect and devoted to their people.
Well, no one is saying that, but I don't think you can deny that the Prince of Wales has been at the cutting edge of so many issues and causes which we now...
I think he's wrong about climate change. I think he's wrong about talking to animals and plants.
Well, no, whether or not you agree with him, the point is he has shown himself to be absolutely committed to the well-being of his peoples.
I don't think there's any evidence for that statement. What evidence do you have for that statement, Ray?
All of the causes he's worked in for the homeless, for education,
that's important ones, yeah.
For spirituality, for interfaith dialogue, with the Prince's Trust, now called the King's Trust. I mean, the King has spent decades committed also to the built environment, with the sustainable farming and the work he's done at Poundbury and trying to make beauty and return beauty and aesthetics.
Okay, no, those are all good points. I just, let's do,
well, you asked me to explain what he's done to help the British people, and I'm just explaining that to you. And the number of young people he's brought back into society who were homeless or on drugs and so forth, and they've now
his charities have done that work.
It's charitable, and that's the value of the monarchy. The monarchy is the backbone of civil society, and they help to support institutions and causes and charities which are decidedly unsexy and wouldn't get any media attention were it not for
having the royal patronage. No, you've made a very strong argument. I know a lot of most moderates would agree with you 100%. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, thank you very much. Quick word to Tom Slater, who's a fellow Republican.
No, I mean, I think when it comes to the question of the monarchy, it's not necessarily the cost, it's the point of principle. And personally, I think just having what are basically overgrown charity fundraisers doesn't necessarily mean that I'm willing to be a subject. It's essentially where I'm coming.
I'm a citizen, not a subject. It's kind of absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Regardless of the people, I always said if the late Queen had stood for election, she'd have gone I'd have voted for her. She was fabulous. She did have a sense of duty. But I'm just, as you see, for us, it's a point of principle. 10:45 is the time. Go on, call in and shout at me. I don't mind. We're allowed to differ. You know, I always give you my honest point of view. I don't just say things to curry favour. At least you know that about me.